All right, we're back. Have you missed us? SKFL, we're back. It's been, I don't know what, Casey, 4-6 weeks or so?
Yeah, I felt like it was like in February. I always know March, we would have been talking more college basketball, and I get crazy at the Mariners. So feel like it was in February. But yeah, I mean, I was looking at the schedule. I mean, we're like 4 months away from the SKFL draft, man.
I was thinking about that too. We literally are. This is the final. Once you hit the draft, now you aren't really thinking about it, but you're thinking about it late at night. It's 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. You can't sleep. Who am I going to keep? Wait a minute. Is it gonna be Tua? Is it gonna be? What about David Montgomery? I was thinking about this 2 nights ago. So we just gotta let the draft play out. Jeff,
it's always been kind of like July 4th date when I really jumped in, but it's really moved up. I mean, we've talked about it. It's 12 months out of the year. But it's funny. I was talking to Jeffrey the other day, and he's coming off of that brutal playoff loss, and I know I've talked about it with Ian before too. And it's like, when you have one of those losses, you almost just have to step away from football. You don't even want to hear any of the news or the moves or the free agents. So I know Jeffrey was going through that for about a month and a half, where he didn't even realize free agent signings that had happened, because he kind of just tuned out NFL Twitter in the offseason, because you don't want the memories of what happened back in December.
Well, the good thing for Jeff, he's well-rounded. He can do some March Madness. He can get wrapped up into a Netflix show. I mean, he's got outlets. Unlike you, where you just start beating up on the kids in the dock.
Yeah, no, it was crazy though. I mean, it was last week. You got the email. I mean, and yeah, to be perfectly honest, it's like, the funny thing is I'm so into the sports card game that, like, I find myself, I went to a card show this weekend. It's like, I'm looking at Brandon Ayuk cards and CeeDee Lamb cards, and it's like, those are the guys who fucked me. So it's like, yeah, now it's time to like buy some, try and make some money off the pain. But yeah, no, like, every time I heard golf, I just thought of golf, for months. And last week, like, you got the email from Yahoo for all these, restart your leagues. And it's like, holy crap, we are back. It's, the draft, you do have to think about it, because, what the Dolphins do in the draft, like if the Dolphins draft a receiver, all of a sudden now Tua's got way more value. But if the Dolphins trade back and, drafts Trey Lance, you're like, okay, well, fuck.
A lot can happen. That's where I want to start. We got a few things we're going to go over, and I'm going to give the floor to Casey towards the end to talk about kind of next steps and where we're going to go as a league. But we want to keep this very SKFL centric, because every talking head in America is talking about the draft. But there are some interesting things it talks about in terms of like the Seahawks. And number one of them is the San Francisco 49ers. They moved to number 3. Everybody thinks they're taking Mac Jones. Some people think they're taking Trey Lance. Nobody thinks they're taking Fields. Jeffrey, who are they taking?
I think they're taking Mac Jones. And as a pseudo, I mean, I always say I root for, my fantasy team first, Seattle second. And that's led to rooting for the 49ers a lot the last 4 years with having Kittle and Owen and Debo and Garoppolo and all that stuff. So I am somewhat of a Niner fan, and I think Shanahan just wants a guy that can come in and play now, and that's Mac Jones. I think they're torn with the Trey Lance thing, because I think he has the bigger upside. But we were talking about that with AJ, like why the Jets couldn't afford to keep Darnold on the roster was because, like, you can't let it play out where if you draft Trey Lance, like Jimmy Garoppolo is probably going to beat him out. So why are you wasting all that draft capital to acquire a guy that's not going to beat out Jimmy Garoppolo? So I think you're going to see Mac Jones go 3. He's probably an upgrade to Garoppolo, and then you can move Garoppolo for a second-round pick and just move on. And the Niners are good. I mean, they're in 3 or 4 other divisions. I still think they're like the 4th or 5th best odds to win the Super Bowl on FanDuel. I think they're 5th, which is kind of crazy coming off the year they are. But yeah, I am disappointed, because I don't know why you give up that much to just get a healthy Garoppolo, basically. But it's got to be Mac Jones.
Casey, I know you have some thoughts on this. Fire away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the opposite. I mean, I know there's a ton of smoke, and everybody's saying Mac Jones, and you ask 10 pundits, and 8 or 9 of them are saying, put it in Sharpie pen, because it's, what they're hearing. But I think I'm not buying it. I actually think that it's Lance. I'd even be shocked if it was Fields. I feel like those 2 guys are just better. And if you look at it from the Shanahan, safe in his job right now. So I feel like, you know, he doesn't need to shoot for the fence to necessarily win right now. I mean, I think he's proven that if he had Jimmy G right now, he could win. So why not take the better kind of long-term prospect, which I don't think is Mac Jones. I think Mac Jones is the guy that can play right now for you. So, I personally, it's more based on what I would do if I was San Francisco, and I've just got Mac Jones so low as an NFL top of prospect that I'd go Fields or I'd go Lance over him in a heartbeat.
I would love like a pattern disruptor, and they just go with and make my friend Jeffrey some money. Just go with Pitts. You go Pitts, Kittle. I mean, those. I mean, look at those skills. They're not going to do that, obviously, but that would be like if you're the Seahawks, that's the move you don't want them to make.
Exactly. And I mean, when that trade came out, you know, we were talking a little bit, and we were like, are they going Sewell? Are they going Chase? Are they going Pitts? And it all kind of made sense on the surface because of what that quarterback was in comparison to Jimmy G. But
yeah,
then you kind of said it. It's like you're not giving up that much to go up and get a tackle or a receiver. I mean, at that point, you just jump up to like 4 or 5. So it's kind of been proven now. They made that move to get a quarterback. So, yeah, that's the one thing that I'm waiting for. I think that's when the draft gets interesting because I still think there's some intrigue there on what San Francisco is going to do. But, yeah, I mean, everything's pointing at Mac Jones. But, man, I'm not a fan of Mac Jones at all.
Well, as a Seahawk fan, I hope to go pick any of those guys because I think they're winning the Super Bowl, any 3 of them anytime soon. All right, next topic we want to go over. Now, more SKFL-centric. You know, if you were drafted, I'll go with Casey here. If you're SKFL draft and you're at round 4 or 5, maybe around 6 or 7, and it's Justin Fields, what team would he have to be on? Maybe 1 or 2 where you're like, I gotta pick him because I really like this fit. Maybe we'll throw San Francisco out just because we just talked about that. But obviously that would be a high-end one for him. But aside from San Francisco, where would you like to see him go?
For me, I mean, right now, if I was like a Fields fan or if I was like in the Fields camp, to me, the best landing spot for him, and it's not even just for necessarily 2021, but I think for his career would be New England. If New England got him, I mean, that's that.
With Cam, that's
fact that Belichick's looking for. They're sitting there at 15. Maybe they can move up a little bit or Fields falls, but I think New England would be my number 1 choice for him. If you're looking at just somewhere where this guy could pop next year and maybe be a Herbert or something like that, I think it's Denver. Denver's at like 8 or 9. I think they're – and, you know, the weapons that Denver has, I think that sets up well for Fields. So those are my 2 spots where I kind of think when I'm watching the draft, when Denver's up, if Fields is there, I think they're eyeing him. And then if it gets past Denver at 9, I'm looking to see if New England makes a move because – Patriots are obviously back.
Yeah, that could be the Elway kiss of death for Fields, though, at the same rate. But I would like to see that because I think he's better than everybody else they've had there in a while. So SKFLers, if you're following here, if Denver takes Justin Fields, you know who's going to be on him. Jeffrey, you have any favorite spots for Fields? Maybe like a Detroit or?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was leaning. The way I look at it is SKFL wise, you're sort of, you know, we've seen this before where, you know, years ago, I think Les drafted Kerry Collins and Jake Locker back to back and like sandwich picks. So I actually, you know, I don't think you're drafting Justin Fields to start next year, but like where he gets SKFL value is if he falls to a team where he's behind a quarterback that you could just grab both of them. So that's where like Detroit comes into play because then it kills Goss value, right? So now instead of having to use a 5th or a 6th to grab Fields, he's fallen to like an 8 or a 9 and you just sort of grab both of them. And that's when the SKFL like cheat code is when you get one of those starting quarterbacks that's like a 14th, 15th round pick. Back in the day, Yusuf did it when he drafted Plummer and then got Cutler as a 17 and then or a 16 and then rode Cutler, you know, 3 or 4 years. So I think, yeah, Denver obviously because of the weapons, but I would also be intrigued with Fields going to like Tampa Bay, New England, something where you know he's not going to start week 1 and you're going to get him as like a 12th, 13th rounder, and then you could potentially keep him. I mean, that's what happened with Mahomes. You know, he wasn't going to start week 1, so you got lucky and he fell and then you get him. So I would probably, Denver, but then he'd probably go if he gets drafted by Denver, you're using too much capital to get Fields with not knowing how good he's going to be. But if he goes to a team like Atlanta, if they trade back and don't want Pitts, or Detroit, and you're looking at him in year 2, kind of like how Jordan Love was. Nobody drafted Jordan Love last year thinking he was going to start, but you just wanted to see how it would work out. So that's kind of where I am with Fields and Lance. They're all kind of in the same boat. I don't think either one of those are playing, week 1, week 2. So yeah, New England's a good fit. I would go Detroit, Atlanta, Denver, one of those 4.
The other 2 teams you kind of just throw out there would be like a Washington. Fitzpatrick's not long-term there, so they're in the market for a young quarterback. And then, even Carolina, depending on what they think Sam Darnold's going to be, they're another one that's kind of picking there in that 8 to 12 range.
Even Chicago too, because I mean he's good enough to like beat out Dalton. They got a offensive mind coach and all that stuff.
Yeah, Fields I could see being kind of this year's Tua, where he's going to get drafted by a squad that has an incumbent. Fields is the guy of the future, better than him, and I'm thinking right around mid-season. Trade deadline, they kind of make.
I was talking to a coworker, and the best, trivia question: who's the best NFL quarterback ever to graduate from Ohio State? And it's Mike Tom. Yeah, it's Mike Tomczak, and I know you can't really look at that stuff, but they do not have a track record. And I like Fields. I think Fields is getting a raw deal, but when you think about all the Ohio State quarterbacks that have busted out of the league, it's hard to project him being good at all.
Definitely what's holding him back. I think coming out of high school, he was the number 1 prospect, even ahead of Trevor Lawrence that year. So he was a guy
couldn't beat out Jake Fromm. Couldn't beat out Jake Fromm. So.
Well, you know where I stand on Fields. Not a fan. I paraded the Niners take him, but he's got the athleticism, so at least he's got those legs. Yeah. We'll see what happens. All right, the next one is kind of a fun one. If Jamar Chase obviously is the top receiver, he's going to go in the top 10, probably go top 8, top 6, maybe even 5, probably no higher than 4 if somebody trades up. What's the ideal landing spot for him? Is it Cincinnati with Burrow? I don't want that, obviously, because of the Higgins keeper value would obviously take a hit. What would be the best spot for him? There could even be a trade up here, but where would, and I'll start with Jeff, where would you love to see Jamar Chase? Or SKFL?
The obvious answer is Cincinnati, because you're obviously pairing him with this college quarterback, but I don't know if he's better than, I don't know if he's better. When I'm thinking about wide receiver 1s in the draft, you're thinking Julio, AJ Green, those guys that are coming into the DeAndre Hopkins, that come into the draft and then come into their respective teams, and they're going to get 130 targets. And if you go to Cincinnati, you don't even know if Burrow's going to play week 1, and he's behind T. Higgins, he's behind Boyd. I think his best options are either Detroit. Goff is going to chuck it, and they have nobody. He doesn't have to beat any. He goes into that lineup, and it's 150 targets day 1. So I think Detroit's his best fit. And then I would actually like to see Miami as well, because they have Will Fuller, but Will Fuller's suspended for a couple games. So you want somebody where he can just hit the ground running. As far as SKFL goes. And if he's going to be a, second or third round SKFL pick, you want a guaranteed 150 targets. And I just don't know if you get that with Cincinnati. Good running game, deep at receiver. So I lean Detroit actually would be my, if I was high on Chase and wanted to have him on my SKFL team, I want him going to Detroit. Good enough quarterback, an offense that's going to throw and pepper him with targets.
That's a nice point, because both those teams are going to be down late a lot too. So you get those extra kind of garbage points too. What do you think, Casey?
Yeah, Cincinnati is by far my number 1 if you're looking at, what his ceiling could be. I think, if you're looking at just maybe next year versus the next 3 to 4 years, you can have an argument. But, we saw Cincinnati. Burrow was on pace to break every record in the book for passing attempts. So, that Cincinnati quarterback, coach, I'm drawing a from the Rams.
Taylor.
That guy chucks. He wants to throw. Burrow was dropping back to pass 40 plus. So if Chase is as good as everybody's saying he's going to be, that's the offense. I kind of look at more like the quality of targets. I mean, yeah, you can have those Allen Robinson types that are on a bad team, but I've had those situations where you've got a great receiver for the first 3 quarters of the game. They're going 3 and out, and they're punting the ball, and all of a sudden it's 2 minutes left in the half, and they've had 2 drives that have gotten them like 75 yards. And I'd be afraid of that in Detroit. I mean, I get it. No competition at receiver there. Goff has proven that he can throw, but Detroit just feels like one of those teams that might be, over next year. So a lot of times you want both offensive pieces. Other than that, I mean, without kind of going crazy with a trade up from somebody.
Talk about the trade ups. Trade ups can happen. They happen.
Yeah, I mean, Miami still makes a little bit of sense. Washington would be a team that I think would be intriguing with Chase, but think about it, Chase isn't going to fall past. So you're talking about somebody really having to make a move up. I think the Eagles would be intriguing. They've got a need there. They want to throw. We just don't really know about Hurts. They're kind of in that striking range where they already moved back. So at 12, maybe they can move up, but it'll be interesting. I mean, right now, Cincinnati's kind of that spot where I'm very intrigued by the Cincinnati pick. I think they go either Chase or Sewell. And if they don't go Chase, I don't know if Detroit passes on them. So I think right now the leaders in the clubhouse to get Chase are either the Bengals or the Lions.
Interesting. Okay, I would love to see him in Miami. That ups Tua's keeper potential value or trades or whatnot. So that's my rooting interest. I'll start with you on this one, Casey. One more before I kind of turn the floor over to you. A lot of good I think there's a ton of good fantasy rookies this year. Like, I think this could be one of the top crops we've had in a while. I know you're not high on Devonta Smith because of his size, and there's a lot of evidence to back that up. If you rank your top 3 pre-draft, don't know what team they're on. Who do you think will be the 1, 2, 3 pick right now based on talent next year? Knowing that typically RBs go higher. Clyde Edwards-Helaire last year. We've got some good ones this year that'll probably pick top of the first, bottom of the second, or bottom of the first, top of the second, excuse me. Who do you like as your top 3 guys?
Yeah, I mean,
or 5, wherever you like.
4 or 5. I think honestly, I think with the 2 quarterback league and just the hoopla and the hype around Trevor Lawrence we've had for the last 3 years, I mean, Trevor Lawrence is probably a second-round pick in the SKFL, definitely a third.
Really?
Burrow went in the third last year.
That's true. Yeah.
I don't know how he falls past. So I've got Lawrence up there. The running backs are the key because running backs for me, I've always kind of awaited kind of their landing spot. I mean, you saw that with Helaire last year where
let me give you a scenario. Najee goes to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And then ETN, Buffalo.
I mean, and those are 2 ideal landing spots for both of them. I mean, those are the 2 type of landing spots that would get me horny on drafting one of those guys in the first round. I mean, that's basically what you saw with, the Helaire versus Jonathan Taylor thing last year. Jonathan Taylor was a guy that, everybody knew was a better prospect, but going to Indy, Marlon Mack was there. You didn't really know what that offense was going to look like. You just kind of sided with the firepower of the offense. Now you see it, and Taylor guys that is a beast. Pittsburgh and Harris would be very intriguing. I think that becomes a thing that's in the top 2 or 3 for sure. Chase we talked about, and I think he's, in consideration as the best receiver. But, I mean, on top of that, I mean, I think Pitts, depending on what we do with this double tight end.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. How high does Pitts go in a double tight end league?
Yeah, I mean, that becomes a big piece. And tight ends, we've seen the track record of rookie tight ends. They usually don't hit right off the bat. They usually are slow to kind of come around. Takes them 2 or 3 years. But he's a guy that everybody loves and has kind of all the fundamentals and skill set and BMI that you look for in a prospect. So you want to see lands. So I think right now, Buffalo was a weird team last year because you watched them and they just didn't run the football. So they're in need of a running back, but that offense is weird. It's almost like what the Chiefs do, where it's like, shit, you're down at the 2-yard line, just pound it in, and they're doing something.
You can't do it.
Running around and chucking it to like a backup tight end. Yeah, I think Pittsburgh is funny because you go back to the Pittsburgh Steelers history, and they've usually been a bell cow type of back that gets 250 to 300 carries of solid touches. Last year or two, they just haven't had that. But yeah, they want to be a team that ground and pounds it. So if they were to get a superstar type of running back, it's intriguing. It'll be interesting to see where people were at on Ben Roethlisberger and that offense in a whole last year. I think going into last year, people were really down on Ben. We saw it. He fell to the 7th round, and then he put up some offensive numbers. A lot of that was they couldn't run the football. So he was just chucking it a ton. But I actually remember saying something last year to somebody in November, December, when you watched that offense, you saw what their running game did, that whoever the Steelers draft in the 2021 NFL draft at running back, I'm going to be on them. So we'll see what they do. That's kind of the running back landing spot that I'm most intrigued with. I mean, if they could go with, a couple different running backs, and I think that guy moves to the top of the fantasy rookie draft board.
Jeffrey, how about you? I mean, you've obviously drafted one of the last couple of years, had some pretty darn good teams. Are you in the same thought? Would you go Lawrence maybe as your top draft pick, or would you slide Pitts up, one of the receivers, maybe one of the Bama receivers? What are you thinking from there in terms of, we don't know what team they're on, but if they landed on the right team, who are your top 3?
Yeah, if they landed on the right team, I think it's one of those receivers and Pitts, honestly, I think goes probably, I do agree. I think Trevor Lawrence goes in the 3rd round, but I think you're going to see on the right team, whoever the Eagles draft at receiver, whoever the Pittsburgh drafts at running back, I think those are the players that potentially could be a 1st, 2nd round pick. And I don't know if anybody's going to reach on Lawrence in the 1st or 2nd round, but he's definitely top of the 3rd. He's going. But in a 2 tight end league, somebody is going to talk themselves into just wanting to own Pitts. And yeah, maybe you don't get value out of it in year 1, but you're going to have one chance to get him, and this is your chance. And I think Pitts might be the first rookie taken.
Well, here was something I'm trying to remember, and you guys, I mean, I've got somebody in my head, but what is the earliest a rookie receiver has been drafted in the SKFL?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know. It's probably not before round 4 or 5.
Definitely, right? I mean, even
I took
last
Judy
year,
in the 7 last year. That felt high.
Yeah, Judy was 7. I mean, CeeDee Lamb was 8 or 9. I mean, it's those guys, receivers tend to fall. Now, granted, last year we had this rookie blow-up receiver class that, maybe that changes things. But, I think Julio Jones was drafted when he was a rookie, like in 6 or 7. And so, I mean, I think I go all the way back. I think Calvin Johnson was a really early rookie.
Where did DK go?
Yeah, DK was an 8. DK was 8. And, I mean, he was sitting in a good spot. So, yeah, you just start thinking about that. And it's like, that's the thing with Chase. You want to say Chase is in that, top 3 or 4. But, how fantasy works. Receivers always feel like after you get past the first 10 or 12, 13 to 36 are all kind of equivalent. As much as people kind of like, Chase and Smith and Waddle, I mean, a lot of those guys are equivalent guys that you can draft in the 7th or 8th round. So landing spot will be a big thing. But as much as you want to think that, Chase, if he's the second coming of, Randy Moss, Calvin Johnson,
it's just more that those receivers now get kept too. So, there's going to be 25 receivers that get kept. So, your chance at getting one of those studs that's, 120 targets, I think, that's why those guys are going to fall into the, 2nd, 3rd round now this year. But
yeah,
I would lean Pitts, and then depending on where Chase goes, and then probably Harris. I think Harris is the first running back off the board, but most people have their running back that they like. I mean, who was the first running back drafted last year in the NFL draft?
Is it Clyde?
I don't. It was in the SKFL.
I think it was Clyde. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know if it always correlates, right, with whoever. People tend to have, like, I know I was high on Gibson, and Gibson was a late round pick in the NFL draft, kind of thing. So just because Harris might be the first, Chuba Hubbard could go somewhere like Etienne. So it's hard to say until you actually see the scheme fit. But I would say Pitts, Harris, and Chase would be, I think, the first 3 rookies that are going to get drafted.
I'd be curious to see where the North Carolina guys go, because I think those guys are a little bit underrated. And there's one special guy, which I've mentioned in text threads. Not going to mention his name. He's going to be good.
You have a sleeper, though. I know.
Big fucking sleeper. Oh, pardon my language, and the dogs are here. All right.
Yeah, you just start going back to the SKFL drafts, and it's like you forget that running backs, people are hungry for running backs in that first or second round.
They
without
are.
like what rosters are going to look like. But, you got people that are reaching on, Josh Jacobs, Mixon, because it's just the best running back that is available, because all the good running backs get kept. So I think, and I'll fall on the sword. I mean, I've always been infatuated with rookies. I mean, all the way back to Reggie Bush and Darren McFadden. Like, there's some uncertainty and like intrigue of, catching the next great thing. But last couple of years, it's been fun. I mean, it feels like it's a lot more receivers that are hitting early than it is running backs. So
I think that's the key is people are going to feel, I mean, you've been burned by David Montgomery, Clyde. People are burned taking those early running backs, whereas the people that took A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, DK, the NFL has swung back where rookie wide receivers now contribute day one. So it's hard to look back at the history and be like, well, AJ Green was an 8th round pick. And these guys, it's just a different league now where people contribute from day one. And if you're sitting there debating, drafting Cortland Sutton in the 3rd or 4th round, you're going to be like, forget that. I'm just going to take Chase. And that's where I think those receivers now are going to leapfrog some of those running backs.
Casey, you felt burned by Clyde last year?
He hurt me in a couple games late. He actually had a decent overall year, not what I expected at all. I was more just surprised he came off the field as much on 3rd down. I mean, I think I was here with Ian and Jeffrey on like the opening game, or maybe it was right.
You took him over Dalvin Cook, man. You got burned.
You're welcome, Jeffrey.
I thought he'd catch 80 balls. I mean,
I thought he would too.
From what I saw,
that was the selling point.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, it was okay, give me McCaffrey on a Chiefs-led Mahomes offense. And, I mean, that just didn't turn into it at all. I mean, we watched games, and it was like Darrell Williams was out on the field 80% of the time on 3rd down, which, maybe that just is without, training camp and preseason games. Maybe
pass pro.
Yeah, the pass protection just didn't really get instilled with him. So we'll see. It's funny. I mean, you look at some like early mocks for 2021, and he's absolutely plummeted in terms of other rookies are going right now with Swift and Akers and even Gibson and Taylor. I mean, I've seen Taylor go as the number 1 overall pick.
Oh, I'm getting hard. Just keep saying it, baby. All right. Well, we're going to do another pod in case I'm going to turn the floor over to you here in a second. We're going to do another pod early next week. I'm going to want to get your calendars ready, boys. I want to get AJ and Wade in because I know those are 2 guys who are college football aficionados, much like myself, but maybe to a higher degree. And you want to get them and anybody else who wants to get involved in that to talk about post-draft and see, okay, which are these, kind of following up what we talked about today, what are the best fits for the SKFL? But Ted, I know, Casey, you got some stuff going on this Friday. We got some things to vote on, so I'm going to let you kind of riff here for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be quick. I mean, I sent something out WhatsApp, and I think we mentioned it on the last pod that we talked about. And you know what? It kind of crept up on us, and there's still so much uncertainty with the NFL season next year. I mean, the 17 game is really a big thing that no one's really talking about and what that's going to do with fantasy. So, I want to get us together. We've always talked about these owners meetings in the off season. You never really do it. We text back and forth with our smaller groups, but then we get into August and we try and collaborate all these changes and it just becomes a cluster. Nothing ever happens. So determined last year that, this was going to be an off season where we kind of get together as a whole in a group and figure out kind of the direction and what we want to do. So there's, 8 or 10 things that we voted on just kind of through the site, just to kind of get an idea where people's heads are at. I'd love to get us together this Friday, like I said, on Friday, the second day of the draft, and not necessarily even vote on everything in stone right now, but if we talk and 10, 11, 12 of us are all in agreement, like, yeah, that's the way we should go. Let's just lock that down. So we're not even bothering with the time down in August. If there's some other things that need more information, we'll bring that up. But I'm just trying to get an open forum with, all 12 of us. I think we did that last year in August when we were trying to figure out if we were even going to have a season. And I thought it worked well. I think doing that once or twice in the off season with all the owners is only going to be a benefit to the league. And I think, I think we're going to send something out. I don't know if it'll be Morrow sending the Zoom link out or if Ian will send it. But I know Jeffrey, AJ, Ian, probably the Sadies are talking about coming and watching day 2 of the draft with us here. And then we'll probably have a computer set up where we can just, maybe 37 o'clock, get everybody online for about an hour and just talk SKFL and kind of what we're thinking. But if you want to refresh your memory, go back to the 2020 site, look at some of those polls, because those are going to be the main topics, really. I mean, something else can always come up, but I want to go back and really just pinpoint those things. We talked about the double tight end right now. 3 months later, I've seen pros and cons to it so I think those are the kind of things that, 3 months ago, just in a vacuum, sounds like a great idea. Let's get all 12 voices on each one of these topics and see which way, as a whole, we're leaning.
Yeah, sounds like a great plan. And check out the site just to kind of refresh your memory. Double tight ends, what were 2 of the other, maybe, Casey, real quick, some of the things that were maybe the highly contentious ones.
Going to 5th keeper versus 4 keepers was one of them.
Yeah, that's definitely one of them. I can pull it up here pretty quickly.
That
was one of them. There were a lot of them. What I always said, if it's a big off-season thing, we can vote on it now. Some of those 5th keepers and different things like that might take an entire season to implement because you kind of need a year to work around that. But
no defense, no kicker.
No defense, no kicker, and then that no kicker was kind of the double tight end thing that was out there.
What to do about week 17? Do we double, play through?
I just think we're way too far away from even really being able to discuss them. Let me see what else. If you remember off the top of your head, Jeff, I'm trying to log in really quick and see what's.
I think we've hit most of them, so we can kind of roll from there. But go check out the site. Just and if hopefully you can make it Friday, I'll be there. What time are you thinking, Casey?
Yeah, it's right around when the Seahawks are picking, unless they trade back. I've kind of
that's gonna be midnight Eastern, baby.
Drop. So I'm thinking some people are working till 5:30 or so, or I'm thinking maybe we can at least kick it off at 6. And even if the group that's here and you're online, and then people can just jump in as they're able. I'm thinking a 6 to 7 p.m. window of kind of being online, 12 of us together.
Cool. I'll plan on being there, and we'll get a link out. Either myself or Ian will put something in the group thread. I've got.
Yeah, just really quick. It was talking about off-season trades, roster, how long to own it, multiple first-round keepers. That was
that's
conversation.
Thing about
same round keeper rounds. Do they move up or do they move down? More keepers, expansion, moving to 14 owners versus 12, moving to decimal scoring. That was one. What to do about
some of those are decimal scoring. I pretty much think when it was voted on was almost unanimous. I think we can get to a point where on some of these we just say yes, let's do it, and not have to worry about it. I do think there's a couple of them out there that. Defense is always been a thing, so I don't know if we can actually figure out that. I'd love to, but we'll at least talk about it. I'm ready to argue a side and kind of take on somebody else's opinion if they feel strongly about it. And then I agree that I think that getting rid of the kicker, and then do we just get rid of them, or the double tight end, I think is another big thing that we need to talk about as a group, because it's kind of
I think there was some motivation or some movement to get. If you get rid of defense, then that's an extra started flex.
Yeah.
But I think that's an easier conversation. I do think the double tight end sounded good when you thought about how many tight ends were not owned that were putting up good weeks. But I do think there's a bigger conversation to be had about you're now going to be rostering 4 or 5. It's becomes like quarterback where you're going to be rostering 4 or 5 tight ends in a double tight end league. It's not as simple as just, well, nobody owns Blake Jarwin and he's good enough to play. It's the fact that like tight end is a very volatile position like defense, and there's a big advantage if you have Kelsey, Kittle, Waller.
No, I mean, that was what Jeffrey and I talked about the other day. Is like when the idea came up, it was like week 3 of the season, and everybody had their tight ends. And then you were looking at who was left on free agency, and it was like all the kind of equivalent. And if you don't have one of the good 5 or 6, you know, you were basically, is it even worth playing a guy like Ertz or just going and grabbing somebody off the waivers? And so it was more thought of, okay, everybody top tight end already owned. Now let's add a second tight end, almost like a kicker, that becomes, you know, a 7 or 12 point play. What we didn't think about is what happens if somebody is able to get a Waller-Kittle combo and literally get points from your tight end position, where you might be going up against somebody that gets 12 points from their tight end position. And
shame on that guy for trading him, first off.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, is that basically a bigger swing in a matchup than even defense was? I mean, at that point. Now, granted, I mean, the argument is, well, if you had to, you know, go get 2 tight ends, it's cost you depth at receiver. It's cost you a running back. So, but yeah, I mean, and then my argument also would be, well, you know, how's that different than somebody who owns Mahomes and Lamar as the 2 best quarterbacks in the league that might be going up against a Goff and Sam Darnold? So it's. I mean, I get it, but it's risky because of what tight end could be. I mean, in years past, it used to be like Gronk and Graham. Then everybody was kind of in the mix. Now there's 6 or 7 of them, and then from there,
yeah, it's just that it's by far the most, besides defense in the SKFL, it's by far the most volatile position in the SKFL, and the point was we're trying to get rid of defense to get rid of the volatility, but you're actually replacing it with a position that's probably even more volatile. And yeah, and it benefits certain owners that have those elite tight ends already. So it's just, you know, I could be swung either way, but it's something that it's not as obvious as, well, yeah, there's 25 good tight ends. We might as well be starting 2 of them. It's just a conversation to think about.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've always had the ability with a start 2 tight ends. I mean, somebody could have always at this point owned Kittle and Kelsey. Just never have had. I mean, it's never happened. Now, if you have 2 mandatory tight ends, that does change things. I mean, the way to bring it back to where we originally thought about it would be, okay, everybody drafts their 1 tight end. And then after the draft, you would then draft your other second tight end when everybody's already had their ability to get their 1, because that's what we had in our mind more so. But then, I mean, how do you do trades in season? What happens?
Yeah, and then it get handicaps where like, well, Moose is keeping Waller, so he can't even target Pitts and those.
Yeah,
so it's
exactly.
Just you don't want to handicap people's draftability.
All right, boys. Well, it'll be a good discussion. Got that topic. We've got about 8 or 9 others, and I know everybody will bring their opinions. Hopefully, they'll show up on Friday. And if not, maybe just let us know kind of what they think, and we can move on and get the stuff done.
Chuba to the Hawks, man. Chuba to the Hawks.
I want a receiver to the Hawks, but just the WhatsApp will probably start getting just to kind of get. You know, I think Thursday with round 1, when all the big name rookies are getting drafted. Just be on the lookout on WhatsApp. I think Jeffrey and I are planning on going over to AJ's and watching round 1 at least together. So we'll start throwing some things on the chat. So if you want to kind of dialogue with us, we'll be on there. And then, like I said, Friday evening, if you guys got an hour, flexible on the time. I mean, basically, I'm here from 4 to 8, 4 to 9, watching round 2 of day 2 of the draft. So
Wade.
Who we got there?
Let's work a trade here, man. He wants to come to a winning franchise.
Little Wade shade late. Don't mind a little Wade shade. All right, boys. Well, we'll
all right, guys.
Talk to you next week.
Good to see you, man.
Later.